nice
Good.
background. It's very outdoor.
You know, that bookshelf is due to be full, so maybe that's the wrong image to send.
Okay, well, thank you for doing this, by the way. I really appreciate it.
Well, tell me what's going on. Tell me about the class. And
so I am in an English writing class for college, and we have been going through your book. Oh, your video is gone. Oh, there it is. We've been going through your book, and each week we kind of break down each chapter. And so each group gets assigned a chapter, and I got assigned the afterword. And so I feel like that's essentially summarizing the whole book and what's happened since. So I didn't want to do slides, is the thing. I didn't want to do like a PowerPoint. So I thought that interviewing you would be like a really good source of information because you are the source of the information that we've been talking about.
If I remember it.
Well, I have it here. You can just tell me pages and we'll just look. Right? We'll just flip through it. So we can just start off by talking about you a little bit. What kind of made you want to be a writer? What inspired you?
You know, I always wanted to be a writer. Back to high school, I had an amazing teacher in high school, and I just loved writing, and I loved all kinds of writing. And I feel really fortunate that I'm able to do what I love to do for a living. It's very rare that you get that kind of opportunity.
Right, that's true, and it's not like work if you're doing what you love, you know, that's...
It's not.
What everyone strives for.
It's not something that you think about retiring from.
Right.
You know, it's sort of, my grandfather was a painter, and he painted until he was 95. I mean, literally, he was painting until the last few months of his life. So if it's possible, it doesn't have to be writing, it doesn't have to be painting, but if you can find something you love doing and persuade other people to pay you to do it, it's kind of amazing.
Right. So we're going to start talking about the book. So remembering all those things, what was like your favorite story to investigate, the favorite person that you met, or just something that really stood out to you?
I guess the most interesting part to investigate was the flavor industry, because I went to college in New Jersey, and I drove past like all these chemical plants and never in a million years would have thought that's where the flavor of my French fries or the flavor of my milkshake was coming from.
Right.
So it was really weird. It was really interesting. I hadn't really seen it in the media before. And I liked the people in the flavor industry a lot. I mean, they were very eccentric, smart people, and they could be making the flavor for health food, you know, as easily as making the flavor for fast food or dog food. So that was some reporting that I really enjoyed.
Right.
And in terms of the people, some of the people I met, you know, I just stayed in touch with for many years after the book. And as a writer, I try not to treat people like objects. I try to treat people like human beings, and I'm very straight about what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. But there's no surprises when they read it. And so some of the people I met really had an impact on me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I actually used to live in New Jersey for a little bit. And so when I was reading that part in the book, I knew exactly what you were talking about, because I had myself driven past it, and I was like, I had this light bulb moment where I was like, there's no way that's what that was.
And it's so weird. I mean, you would think that maybe the antifreeze for your car is coming out of these buildings, but not, you know, what makes your French fries taste good.
Tastes good, right. So kind of the flip side of that, what was, I guess, your like least favorite part? Like maybe the grossest part or the worst part to investigate?
Yeah, I mean, the grossest part on a superficial level was that visit to the slaughterhouse.
Right.
And, you know, I thought it was really important to see firsthand and experience as someone who was eating meat, you know, to really confront the reality of it.
Right.
And it was really ugly. You know, when you kill large animals and cut them up, it's ugly.
Right.
But the thing that was most disturbing to me wasn't the way that the animals were being treated. It was the way that the human beings were being treated. And I really went into that slaughterhouse to see how meatpacking workers are being treated. And it was terrible. I spent time in their homes. I spent time with a lot of poor people who were being treated very badly. And in many ways, that's the most important part of the book for me. It's sort of the part of the book that hasn't gotten the most attention. If you look, if this is a writing class, if you look at how the book is structured, it's deliberately structured so that it takes you at the crucial part of the book into the slaughterhouse. And, Upton Sinclair, who wrote The Jungle, used the slaughterhouse as a metaphor for the corruption and the cruelty of American capitalism in the late 19th century. And so my idea wasn't original, but in a lot of ways, I was using the slaughterhouse in the same way. Right. And I opened the book in a happier place with the founding fathers and the beginning of this industry. But this industry ultimately leads you into this very dark place where people are being terribly abused.
Right.
And Upton Sinclair is a much greater writer, much better writer, etc. But I wound up finding the same thing that he did, which, he wrote The Jungle, and it was all about the exploitation of meatpacking workers. And what it led to was people being worried about what's in their meat.
Right.
And I wrote Fast Food Nation with a lot of the same sort of ambition. And I feel very grateful for the success that it had. And I feel really proud of the book. But the part of the book that I care most about, which is, what's happening to poor immigrant workers, very few people cared about.
Really?
Yeah.
That's interesting. So we were in class, I guess, to kind of like tangent. We were talking about Hank and kind of, instead of the immigrant workers, but the ranchers themselves. What do you feel like that got any more light shed on it as opposed to the immigrant workers, or do you feel like they're both kind of like in the dark, essentially?
Well, what's happening to farmers and ranchers in America has gotten more attention, but nowhere near enough attention. I mean, one of the goals was to show you who brings you our food. That was a tragic story. He was a friend of mine, and I was really stunned when he took his own life. But his family has stayed on the ranch, his wife and his daughters. It's kind of amazing, but when I was reporting Fast Food Nation, they were just, these adorable little girls riding in the back of the minivan, and now they are these strong, smart, incredibly cool young women who are running the ranch and committed to saving the ranch. So, that story has it's fundamentally tragic because of his suicide, but it has a quasi-happy ending in that his wife and kids have stayed on the land, preserved the land, and are committed to ranching. Right. Some of the fast food worker story has not a totally happy ending, but right now there's the whole fight for 15, and fast food workers are really speaking out. The meatpacking story just continues to be sad, and particularly with our current president cracking down on undocumented workers. So many of these meatpacking workers are undocumented, so they not only have one of the toughest jobs you could ever imagine doing, but it also happens to be really dangerous. And now, when they go to work, they literally have to worry about whether they're going to see their kids at the end of the day, because if there's an immigration raid on the meatpacking plant, then they could get put into detention, and their kids might not have anyone to pick them up from school at the end of the day.
Right.
Which sounds unbelievable, but it sort of is. It's America in the year 2017, and just to go off on a little political rant, it's unbelievable to me that the richest president in American history, with a cabinet that's the richest in American history, is causing such deep anxiety and stress for the poorest workers in this country. It's unbelievable.
I agree.
It's my
Thank you. We actually talk about stuff like that in class too, so it's nice. We do also talk about that. So do you eat? So you did eat meat previous to the book, but do you eat meat now? Did that change at all?
I do.
You do.
And some of the angriest people at me after the publication of the book were vegetarians who found out that I still eat meat because, I should know better having seen what I've seen. I don't eat industrial meat. I don't eat, meat that comes out of the system. But, and I don't eat very much meat, but I still do. I feel like, I'm talking to you from the mountains of Utah right now. And when I go out in the hills, there's all kinds of predator here. There's bear, there's mountain lion, and I'm not going to condemn them for wanting to eat me and my dog. So my justification is I feel like I'm not outside of nature. I'm part of nature. I'm part of the food chain, but I don't eat a lot of meat, and I really totally oppose the industrial food system.
So you don't eat fast food. Did you eat fast food previous to the book?
I ate a lot of fast food.
Did you?
I did. I mean, traveling around, it was just so easy to go to McDonald's, and so much of my work was on the road. I would know exactly what I would get. I was never really crazy about the hamburgers, but I love the French fries. What can I say? I really did. Now, I'm not pure in the sense that I just gave you this whole rant about not being part of the industrial meat system, but every now and then, when I got the urge, I go to In-N-Out.
What do you do? Their fries. I love their fries.
They treat their workers well. It's family owned. It's not health food, but for what they're doing, there is a kind of...
I think you covered your mic. Oh, there it goes. I think you had covered your mic for a second.
But for what they're doing, there's a real integrity at In-N-Out. So, every now and then, if I want a hamburger and fries, that's where I go. And I'm not pure, but I'm trying to do the right thing.
Right. Are there any stories that you investigated that you left out of the book?
Yeah. I had a whole section on genetically modified food that I was going to put in the book. And then McDonald's announced that they were not going to use genetically modified potatoes in their French fries. And I was using fast food as a way of going off on all these other tangents that I cared about. And once McDonald's did that, I really couldn't figure out a way to keep the genetically modified food section in. So there was a documentary that I helped make kind of based on Fast Food Nation called Food Inc. Mm-hmm. And we were able to look at genetically modified foods a little bit in the documentary, and I haven't been able to do it in the book.
So how did you deal with any opposition that you faced from the book?
I mentioned vegetarians giving me a hard time, but some of my closest friends are vegetarians and family members, and they give me a hard time within limits. The fast food companies were a lot tougher and a lot meaner and try to make my life very unpleasant. It's interesting. The last book I had published was about nuclear weapons. And nuclear weapons are the greatest national security threat that we face. And I think a lot of information about nuclear weapons should be kept secret. And what's interesting is I was kind of stressed out doing research on nuclear weapons because this is such top secret security information. But what's amazing is I got so much more shit writing about companies that sell hamburger and French fries than about, the U.S. government and its nuclear weapons policies. I mean, the fast food companies hired people to come to bookstores that I was giving talks at and disrupt the talks. If I would appear on college campuses, as I did for a while, to talk about the food industry and the food system, they would have people in the audience to disrupt my talks there. It's kind of amazing, but I'd have to have armed security sometimes when I showed up to speak in public. And, it really pissed me off. And it pissed me off because they spend billions of dollars getting their point of view out into the world. And I can guarantee you that the marketing budget for Fast Food Nation was significantly less than that. And, they wrap themselves in the eager to try to destroy my reputation and personally attack me just because I disagreed with their business policies. I mean, at one point, they set up a website to attack me that had all this really nasty stuff about me. And anyway, it's unpleasant, but when you criticize really powerful, mean corporations, that's what happens.
Right. I guess that comes with it. Is there anything else that you want to talk about the book before we move on?
Yeah. I guess for those of you who want to be writers, it was my first book, and none of the big New York City publishers wanted to publish it. I was very lucky. I got a contract from one of the last independent publishing houses based in Boston. They gave me enough money so I could write it. But there was no expectation that it was going to be a bestseller. And even the company that bought it didn't think it was going to be a bestseller. So they ran out of books when I was, on my book tour. And that's, on the one hand, a good thing. But on the other hand, you want people to be able to buy your book. And I guess it's just a reminder that ultimately nobody really knows what's going to sell, what's going to be successful. And again, I'm not perfect, I'm not pure, but I really wrote from the heart what I cared about. And I wrote the book because I cared about the subject, I cared about the people that I met, and it was immensely, immensely gratifying to find out that other people cared too, and people would read the book. And, it's immensely gratifying that 16 years after it's published, that you're forced to read it at school. You give a shit enough about it to ask me about it. Right. I mean, really.
Right.
And I started the reporting. I first started for Rolling Stone, the reporting for Fast Food Nation 20 years ago, which is kind of amazing. Mm-hmm. How old a person are you?
I'm 22, so I was 2 when you started.
Yeah. It's crazy. So, again, as a writer, you do what you need to do to make money. I mean, hopefully you don't do anything horrible that hurts other people, but I have friends who are wonderful writers who have to write all kinds of things they don't care about just to pay the bills. And it's like if you're a musician, if you're a writer, if you're an actor, it's the same sort of thing. There's pressures to pay the bill, but it just is intensely rewarding and gratifying when you do something you care about and other people respond to it. And so that's how I feel about Fast Food Nation. And even though I don't write about food anymore and I'm not researching it anymore, 20 years later, I still care about it. And if some farm worker group, I've been really involved in farm worker issues, if they want me to come and help, or, if they're fast food workers, I still care about all this stuff, even though I'm not writing about it. So my advice to aspiring writers is just fight to write what you care about. And you may not get success with it. It may not resonate with the public, but there's something that just ultimately feels better if you can do it than just treating your work like it's a commodity, like it's just fast food.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It saved me boring PowerPoint slides, and I learned a lot just from this and seeing how passionate you are. It makes reading the book that much better, knowing that you were this passionate about it. So going back and when I was reading it, and I don't know, it makes it touchable, I guess you could say.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. And my hope is that you get a really good grade on this assignment.
Me too.
Well, good luck.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Right. You take care.
You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.